More than 1,000 people rallied in the Rain Park in Hong Kong to show their protests against the administration. A sea of umbrellas was formed as protesters chanted slogans calling for democracy. The crowd was a mix of young and elderly people, with most wearing masks. An anti-government rally was also held at the Edinburgh Palace. People could be seen writing messages on a timeline banner of the protests at the rally. The protests in Hong Kong have continued for months now, and the weekends have become the most chaotic. On Saturday, the police were seen using batons and pepper spray on the protesters gathered in a shopping mall. Protesters had been arrested during this police carnage, while the protesters have been demanding an inquiry against police brutality. The Hong Kong police has said that people in Hong Kong are living in a state of quote-unquote black terror amidst these protests. More protests are planned in the next few days, including a countdown to New Year's Day and a march on January the 1st that could attract a big crowd. And now we have journalist and special correspondent for the LA Times and Washington Post, Ryan Ho Kilpatrick, joining us live on the broadcast. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us. The protests in Hong Kong have literally defined the year 2019, and it is set to continue unabated into 2020.
Yes, that's true. Today's protest was sort of an opportunity both to look back at the past 6 months, over 200 days of protest, and to look forward to what will be happening in the coming year. And over 1,000 people showed up today, and they all vowed to continue fighting, to continue struggling for democracy in Hong Kong into the new year and the years after that, if that's what it takes to achieve their goals.
Ryan, we're talking about the weekends when the protests particularly become violent and chaotic. We've seen what happened on Saturday. It was absolute carnage in the shopping mall, and we're seeing protests today as well, even as more and more protests being planned, like the massive one slated for the 1st of January.
Yes, in fact, this weekend saw some concerning and rather bizarre scenes in shopping malls around Hong Kong, as perhaps dozens of protesters showed up to march through malls, chanting slogans, urging people to join them and to protest instead of shopping. But in both instances over the weekend, we saw protesters, in fact, being outnumbered by undercover policemen dressed as protesters, who then jumped upon the protesters and arrested them quite violently. And as you mentioned, on New Year's Day, there's going to be another massive march, the first big one for weeks. And organizers are, again, expecting perhaps hundreds of thousands of people to turn up. They want this to really set the tone for the new year, to remind Hong Kongers and the whole world that the struggle is not over and that they have so much work left to do and will continue fighting.
Ryan, the Hong Kong police has said that people in Hong Kong are living in a state of quote-unquote black terror. I want to understand, how is the public in Hong Kong holding up even as these protests continue?
Well, there is certainly a lot of unease amongst the general populace in Hong Kong. Over the past 6 months, the atmosphere has gone incredibly tense all around the city. But I think it would be unfair to lay all the blame on protesters. In fact, polls consistently show that well over half the population have lost complete faith in the police force. In a poll by the University of Hong Kong, over 60% of respondents ranked their faith in police as 0 out of 10. And a report from the Washington Post just last week, based on leaked police documents, showed that they violate their own guidelines while suppressing protests on a nearly daily basis. So there is certainly a lot of fear, a lot of uneasiness, but I think the characterization of blaming the protests for that is inaccurate.
Ryan Ho Kilpatrick joining us with that live update straight from Hong Kong. Ryan, thank you so much for being with us here on WION World is One.